Greetings from Seattle, Washington, in the great Pacific Northwest. I am Jason Rigdon, and you are listening to the Podcast of Mystery, the show that always leaves you with more questions than answers, the podcast where I talk with extraordinary guests about the paranormal, the strange, and the unknown. On this episode, I'll be talking with Chaz about his book, Paranormal Expeditions: Hunt for the Friendship Group, a story of UFOs, Nazis, psychedelics, and an expedition to the edge of the world, available right now on Amazon. I absolutely loved our conversation. Chaz has a very unique perspective and a style that I really appreciate. I can't wait to have Chaz on the show again sometime soon. But before we get to this amazing conversation, I've got this quick message. You are probably listening to me right now on your phone. Would you please consider sharing this episode on social media? Or share a link to this episode with a friend through a text message. The Podcast of Mystery needs your help to grow. If you think this episode is interesting, why not share it with others? Do it now. It's super easy. Most every podcast client has some kind of built-in sharing button. Just click that and tell your followers why the Podcast of Mystery is awesome. It doesn't matter how many followers you have, every single share counts. So please do me a favor and share this episode on social media right now.
Hi guys, I'm Chaz of the Dead. You can find me on Instagram, on Twitter, and at chazofthedead.com on all of those. And I'm here to talk about my book today, Paranormal Expeditions: Hunt for the Friendship, and my bizarre research and trip to Chile to look into a UFO legend.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. So what kind of made you go to Chile kind of investigating UFOs?
So I first came across this case of the friendship through some podcasts who made some references to it, and I found that there wasn't really a lot, English language information out there about this case. And for those of us unfamiliar, which it's probably a lot, the friendship is this group of tall, blonde, human-looking entities, let's say, that are very much physical and have been interacting with people in southern Chile and Patagonia for a few decades. And they themselves claim to be extraterrestrials. And the people who have interactions with them also seem to have these bizarre interactions with UFOs, usually tied to this group. And what kind of drew me to the case was an article I came across mentioned a advertisement that they had found in a newspaper in Puerto Montt, Chile. And this advertisement was an English language advertisement printed in this local paper that said, "To the Friendship Island. I'm the professional engineer you spoke to 2 years ago in Sarasota, Florida. I did not know who you were then, but I know now, and I would like to visit your home very much." And Sarasota, Florida is my hometown. So that was kind of like this weird, for whatever reason, it kind of like vindicated it enough in my mind to be something that warranted further research and further looking into. And I had always been drawn to the case initially because it also had all these kind of possible explanations. All of them I kind of explore in the book. That there's these, of course, the traditional explanation, I suppose, in this case, which is they're telling the truth and there's some kind of alien. Which, if that's true, that's insane. It's bizarre. It's a first time type deal. Then there's the other theory that this is perhaps a Nazi escaped research lab hidden away in one of the thousands of islands, the Patagonian archipelagos. And this is an interesting theory. The people involved they're always described as being tall and blonde and vaguely European. Is a description that comes up often. They look nothing like Americans, was how one witness described it. They're these kind of European ancestry. So this is an interesting explanation, and I went and explored. I went to a now defunct Nazi camp that was in Chile. After the war, it ran for from the, I believe, mid 50s through the 70s, and it was run by a former Nazi and a child molester named Paul Schaefer, who was eventually arrested for the latter crimes. Um, and this compound was used as kind of like a clandestine prison, and they would send people to vanish there. Several people were last seen and heard of going to this Colonia Dignidad, and they just disappeared, and still to this day haven't been found. Now it's been rebranded as this weird kind of German tourist site. It's very bizarre. It's probably one of the creepiest, if not the creepiest location I've ever been to. Um, it's a weird one. And it was, a time where I kind of didn't tell them I'm here to write a book about Nazi UFOs. I was like, no, I'm just a tourist. There was some sneaking around involved, and it was a very very strange visit. And I love that explanation, and I think it's interesting. But I'm also very honest in the book that it doesn't really line up in a lot of the aspects. That camp was from the 50s is when it started, pretty close to after the war. The bulk of the friendship sightings occurred in the 80s. And the description is of young people. There's no old people, there's no kids. They're all kind of late 20s, early 30s. And they're all these doctors and scientists with weird specializations. If it was this kind of society, a breakaway society, you would expect to see people of multiple ages. If they were, human Nazis, they'd be old. They could possibly be the kids of a breakaway group, but the fact that they're all, aged similarly, again, kind of dis- disputes that factor. And again, some of the other strangeness and weirdness tied to them doesn't really match up with a human explanation either. And there's a third kind of explanation I explore, and it's the idea that it's an evolution of a more ancient legend. That it's some kind of interaction that's been happening for a long time. I actually keep coming across to this day, even after the book's been out, some weird stories and stuff that seem to correlate with that idea.
Interesting. Wow, that is really fascinating. How were these interactions with these friends? Were they seen in ships or just like on the street, or how do people interact with them?
So oddly enough, they're mostly met in the streets or in people's homes or on boats. And this was one of the weird connections that stuck out in that kind of uh, the folklore idea, because there's legends of ghost ships and things going quite far back in the region. Ghost ships, which are piloted by wizards who make these kind of deals, and it oddly seems similar to this friendship group. And they have these interactions where they kind of make bargains with smugglers, people on the shadier end of the law. Pirates and things are the ones who are coming forward and being like, yeah, I worked for these guys and they were weird. And one of the big stories stems from a man, Ernesto de la Fuente, and he's one of the main witnesses in the book. And he claims he was healed of lung cancer by the group. He visited their island and they healed him. Now, it does look like he did have a lung ailment, but as far as whether that was cancer or not is still up for debate. But it does look like he was healed of something. Uh, and this is one legend that really kind of has kept it alive in South America. People, looking for alternative methods of healing. Um, Most of the people who search for the island, and it's not many people. I've found a few counts scattered over the decades, but most of them aren't, American tourists who read a weird newspaper advertisement. Most of them are people who are looking for the cure. They're looking for a cure for something. One of the accounts I came across was a man looking to cure his wife's cancer. Thought if he could get in contact with it, that they could help him. Other accounts, though, of some of these traders and interactions are more negative. They've hired people to do tasks that, and they pay them with these weird nuggets of platinum and these strange coins. And after they were paid, these people were beaten and robbed by other traders and things, and kind of intimidated away from interacting with the group again. Um, they seem kind of, uh, I would put them as neutral from what I've come across. They seem like they'll scratch your back if you scratch theirs, kind of situation. So that's, it's interesting. It's a bizarre legend, and the chance to go down there and investigate it was really a great opportunity.
So they have an island? Like, is it like a colony where they've all kind of, where they gather, where they live?
Yeah, so they supposedly are based out of this Friendship Island. And in Chile and Patagonia, there's over 2,000 tiny little islands, almost all of them uninhabited. Um, and there's lots of theories about, maybe it's this one, maybe it's that one. Um, but people have visited those islands, and there's not there's not a base there, so no one really knows exactly where this area could be. It could be even in Argentinian Patagonia, further south in the tip there. But the idea is that they have this heavily forested island, so you can't really see much other than like a small wooden dock. And this is a few accounts have referenced this, and that once you get past that they have um, this very elaborate compound. It's got heated pools and large facilities, and supposedly a huge underground sector where there's a generator, and the Ernesto de la Fuente noted that everything was controlled by computers, which was really bizarre in the early 80s. Like this was a state of the art, extremely expensive operation they had in the middle of nowhere. And they said they were mining platinum under the island, mining some rare mineral. Um, and he didn't see a hospital during his visit, which was bizarre because he got healed. And he had these kind of foggy memories, and he didn't really remember much after arriving. It sounds very similar to other UFO abductees. This kind of hazy screen memory kind of weirdness. And later on, he would claim lots of weird stuff, psychic dolphins that patrolled the islands, and that's one of my favorite details. And bizarrely enough, one that came up in my actual research. I want to state I do not believe in psychic dolphins, but we did see some oddly timed dolphins. There were some synchronistic dolphins. um, but he kind of really, his story kind of got weird and crazy as the years went on. And many speculate, and I kind of tend to agree, that a lot of that's just kind of publicity. He started making a kind of money from showing up and talking to these UFO groups, and his people kind of lost interest in the story that was on like a Chilean version of Unsolved Mysteries. It kind of had its moment in the sun and died down in the 90s, but people kept having these interactions. And the investigators down in South America, some of them were dedicated to the case and kept following it, and doing some translations and finding other translated works and stuff. I put together a pretty comprehensive English version of this case, for people to look at, as well as doing my own crazy experiments and things while I was down there.
And so when you went down there, you are, a foreigner, you're asking people about these very strange things. How is that investigation?
It was interesting. It was I did have some help. I was dating a Mexican girl at the time. She came with me, and she was essential in the writing of this book and the translating and all that the on the ground side. Though Chilean Spanish is pretty unique. It's very weird, kind of separate dialect, and most Spanish speakers will agree that it's a weird one. So even she had some difficulty. But what we really found in Chile is that UFOs are kind of just part of the culture. Like people are very matter of fact about it. Uh, their government has been publishing UFO videos like the Navy ones the US has published recently. They've been doing it for decades. They've been like, here's a weird UFO. This is a weird UFO that we caught. And it's just like this kind of public portion of their government. It's only them in France that do those things above board. You know, the U.S. has had their Project Blue Books and ATIP and these secret projects, but they've just been doing it on the surface. And the people all around the country, all up and down it, they see UFOs, and I think it does have to do with it being right on the Andes Mountains. I mean, it's the country's really built into the mountains. In the north, you have some of the clearest skies in the world in the deserts there, and then in Patagonia, one investigator, South American investigator, noted that it's the place with the highest number of bizarre cases. One of the cases I reference in the book, there's a girl who got zapped by a UFO in front of several witnesses, like in broad daylight, like a UFO came down, shot her with some kind of ray gun. So it's like really bizarre cases, and the friendship definitely falls into that that area. But when you talk to people they're like, oh yeah, the UFOs are here, and but yeah, weird stuff happens. I want to go. They're almost cautious. They're like, I want to look too hard at it because it's definitely real. Like it can mess you up. And I looked pretty hard. I haven't abducted yet. I'm ready. I'm willing, but it hasn't happened yet. Though I have in this research have seen some weird stuff.
What would you mind sharing with the weird stuff that you saw? I can't leave that.
Yeah. So what kind of started my focus more into the UFO subject was a very bizarre experiment. It's unique as far as I'm aware. But I took some for a couple months every weekend, spaced out about a week. I would take these mushroom teas and do Ouija board seance. And lots of people have strong opinions about the Ouija board. As far as I'm concerned, it's a piece of cardboard and a piece of plastic. And I've had mine for more, I think more than a decade now, and it's fine. It's a fun tool. I used it a lot, but it's not really the Hollywood version that some people like to pretend it is. Um, so I was doing this as just an attempt to put myself in an altered state and an altered consciousness, and maybe interact with some kind of entity. And I tried several times, and nothing happened. Nothing during the seances, that is. In the times immediately before and in the weeks in between, I started to see UFOs. The first one I saw was I had prepared the tea. I was about to start drinking it. I might have had one sip or two, but for experienced users, they know mushrooms about an hour to kick in, 40 minutes to an hour. So I had a couple of sips and I saw an object in the sky. I thought it was a plane initially, and it burst into several smaller objects, kind of like an explosion, like a re-entry of a satellite. But nothing like that was reported on any news sites or any science websites. Nothing on any kind of re-entry scheduled for that night. and no reference to it afterwards. So that was the first kind of bizarre thing. Later on, I was with a friend and I was talking about this weird experiment, this research, and he was kind of like blowing it off, like, I don't know, that's pretty crazy. Mushrooms, I don't think that's a productive route. And we started to hear a metallic hum, and one of us said, "Oh, maybe that's the aliens now," one as a joke. But sure enough, a triangle-shaped craft uh, appeared past the tree line. It was hovering above the house. It had a light in each corner, and it was so low down that um, I could have hit it with like a baseball. It was really kind of just right above the house, and it hovered for a moment and continued on. And we were both, kind of like, what the hell was that? And I talked to this friend recently, as I was back in town, and he was like, "Yeah, I it was weird. I don't know what it was. It was definitely something I can't. It wasn't like a plane that we know about or anything, and it was just a weird experience." So this kind of had confirmed a theory that's popular out there, that paranormal activity is manifestations of the same phenomenon. Bigfoot, UFOs, and poltergeist. These are all kind of the same. And I'm not necessarily 100% sold on that idea, but I think the states of consciousness and uh, the physiological aspects of it um, allow you to facilitate the same sighting. So, Bigfoot, UFOs might be separate things, but when you're in this altered state, you're in a space where you can see them. And that's kind of where I've approached my research since that experiment, where I put myself in these altered states, usually with some witnesses and some people around who are not, and see if we can experience a shared hallucination. Experience paranormal activity. As far as science is concerned, it's a shared hallucination. But if we can get something to that level, the next step is getting it to a level where it manifests physically, whether that is creating a footprint in the Bigfoot aspect, or if that's leaving angel hair, that weird ectoplasmy substance. Any of those things could be, they're physical things that have happened. They've been recorded, they've been tested in labs. There's an area where this phenomenon blends into the physical world. Something's happening, to the earth and on the earth when these events occur. Um, they might be occurring in other realms at the same time, but there is a crossover. So that's really where the research is focused at, looking for.
Yeah, this is a very fascinating topic. One of our very first episodes was about efforts to decriminalize psychedelic plants here in Washington State, well, specifically in Port Townsend. For people that want to maybe learn more about this kind of intersection between kind of the paranormal and these kind of mind-altering substances, do you have any recommendations for them of where to start their research?
I check out my book, of course. But I would, definitely start at the source. Go with some Timothy Leary, and I'm a big fan of on the philosophical and the I'm drawing a blank. Give me 1 second. I think it's what is his name? Playboy guy.
The beauty of podcasting is we
Right?
can make it like you
Okay,
knew it
here we go. I'm
immediately.
gonna pause for a second. So it sounds like we did it.
Yeah,
You can
yeah.
leave it. I don't care. It was Robert Anton Wilson. Um,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
One of my
so
favorite
he
authors.
he was a famous weirdo, and his writings I think are still really relevant. I think when it comes to like Discordianism, that kind of occult theory, it's very productive when applied to this kind of research. Um, taking that neutral kind of perspective. I think his writings are very valuable. in a kind of esoteric way to this kind of research to make it more palatable. Because it is, and I still get it. There's a very strong aversion to my research by some in the paranormal community, and I don't want to point fingers, but it's the kind of Jesus-y people who are like playing with Ouija boards and taking mushrooms. That's satanic, and this is about going to hotels and taking pictures of dust and talking to voice recorders. And it's a kind of a battle with that kind of thought out there. But I think it's a productive way to look at these vehicles and this interaction. And through some of the research I've been doing recently, it seems like there's this a theory I've come across in a bizarrely convincing way that there's a human explanation around UFOs, but seeing these craft and being around them or just near their landing site causes these weird temporal effects that are, and this is described independently by a Russian scientist who claimed to build one of these flying platforms. He said that the effects are, missing time and these weird dizziness, and all the things he described were all the things I described in my book. When it comes to the parallels between UFO sightings and psychedelics. So it seems that even perhaps these craft create a psychedelic effect when you're around them, which causes some of these weird stories. A good example is the Travis Walton case. And that was the one in Arizona where he was zapped by a UFO in front of 7 of his coworkers. They were loggers in Arizona, and he was gone for a week. And the police thought his coworkers killed him. Like this, it was a murder investigation and everything. And they just found him walking down a highway, and he thought he was gone for a few hours. And he talks about seeing these weird, beautiful people and small little aliens and Blue Hill. He has this bizarre, super bizarre description that just sounds so unrealistic, even though there's so many witnesses to the case. Well, this description doesn't sound that bizarre for someone who's been on a heavy dose of psychedelic. It sounds like what he's describing, and something about these craft. There's a when it comes to craft that are theoretically able to travel faster than light, it becomes this weird time space bending effect that the human mind does its best to process. It's not able to process it fully. It just does its best. And that's the same kind of headspace and the same kind of effect that occurs when you're on psychedelics. So I think it's a fascinating aspect and an angle to look at. And I do encourage it tacitly. Again, do research, always be safe, always use, trip spotters, and, if you're feeling bad, go to the hospital. It's not worth, it can be dangerous. In regards to that other experiment, space your trips out way longer than a week. I did have some very negative physiological effects after doing that for a month and a half. Blacking out and collapsing and stuff like that. So the heavy doses of psychedelics, it's a drug. It needs to be handled with respect and care. Doing your research and being absolutely understanding of the power of these things. And always start with a lower dose than you think you need. That's just a good tip for whatever you're doing.
Yeah, pretty much anything in life, you should go just a step lower.
Yeah, you can always add more, but you can't take it away. So be cautious.
So would you consider yourself like I believe the word is a psychonaut? Is that the word?
Yeah, I definitely, I actually have on, can't see it, but it's my psychedelic research volunteer T-shirt. I think that is an aspect of this. Um, Again, I think it's an avenue that has to be handled really delicately, because it adds a layer of unbelievability. You know, a lot of people dismiss the research because it's because I just used drugs. Period. In the same way they dismissed Timothy Leary with his experiment. Um, it's just something that's par for the course. So I do consider myself a psychonaut. I think these experiments I conduct in the field on these substances are definitely a psychonautic in nature. I don't know if that's a word, but if not, I'm coining it. um, uh, but I definitely think that's a realm it sits in. But I also hope to keep it in the paranormal research realm. I think that's where the kind of focus is, because a lot of psychonauts, and this was me included for a while. You just take some weird drugs in your room and have some weird adventures and in your psyche and things like that, to apply it in a field research way, to go to these locations where these um, psychedelic events happen spontaneously, and then force one to occur. I think it's a research avenue that's valid, and for now, I'm going to keep doing it until I find some evidence that it's not. But as far as the research has been going with the friendship case and some new cases and subjects I'm working on, the synchronicities are pretty heavy. And I haven't even started doing psychedelic experiments when it comes to these new subjects. So I think it's interesting. I think there's this idea that the phenomenon looks back at the people who look into it. And I just hope it's true. Everyone's like, oh no, you're going to get probed by aliens. Whatever. As long as I can look at them, touch them. I'm sure once I get on the UFO, I'll get my way out of there. I'll take a hostage or something. I just want to know it's real, and it's still that barrier where all this is weird and the research gets weird, but until I'm on that UFO, I won't be satisfied.
So going back to the friendship group, do we have any idea what their agenda is?
Not really. The interactions they have been, mostly for supplies and trading. And one time, one of the stories in the book, they destroyed a couple's boat, and they paid them off. Like it was an accident kind of situation. Um, Another story, though, one of the more darker ones, involved a UFO group who was close friends with Ernesto de la Fuente and supposedly had contact with the friendship group, and they would send these letters and things back and forth. And occasionally, members of the group were said to go and uh, join the friendship at their island, and these members were never seen again. Um, and the leader of this UFO group apparently went on and did a TV interview and revealed some kind of information that was too much. And the friendship group decided to cut ties, and they sent him this parting gift, which was this weird kind of porcelain statue. It was made out of a weird material that they weren't really sure what it was, but they used it as the centerpiece for their meeting table. And the leader of this group, he was an older guy, but after he received this gift, he started to rapidly decline in health. Like he developed dementia in a couple weeks. And then other people in the group, they started to forget like basic things like where they worked and like what their parents' names were and stuff. And the group kind of dissolved because no one was like keeping the schedule or anything like that. Everyone kept forgetting, and the person who was part of this group and recalling the story theorizes that that little porcelain statue's out there making someone forget something now. Like he believes that was the source of this kind of uh, weird onset dementia. And this story I think was a really important one to include because it kind of shows this like I think kind of the attitude of shit. Again, I'm not really sure what their motive is, but their attitude is like, well, we're here to do business. If you screw us over, we'll screw you over. Like here, I'm gonna send you a poison statue or whatever it is. They seem to, not be afraid to use their advanced abilities, whether those are human abilities or extraterrestrial.
Where did the name come from? Do you know?
So that is what they call themselves, and it's interesting that it's the friendship. It's not it's not El Amigos. It's the friendship. They don't use Spanish. They use this English translation. Um, and that's what they tell people in Chile who they are. Um, so it's this another bizarre detail. They do seem to be masters of several languages. Some of the stories I include talk about them switching from Dutch to Spanish to English, and like they're able to speak a variety of languages. Um, it's this they're quite a bizarre uh, uh, entity, and they are similar to the kind of contactee reports in the 50s and 60s in the U.S. of the tall blonde Venetians from Venus and from Mars. And, they were smoking hot, and they were all about space communism, and they had these. And the friendship group seems to have some similar some obvious similarities in appearance, in attractiveness, and their ideology is kind of similar. They do have a few times they've spouted off about not using nuclear weapons. One of their more interesting claims is that they come from the center of the universe, possibly indicating a more ultra terrestrial origin. But again, I think these might be off the cuff lies. They all seem to have angelic names. There's an Ariel, a Gabriel, you know, Michael. They're all these biblical names, mostly from angel, which again is another bizarre connection. Could that be because they took the rat lines from the Vatican um, into South America and they got these Catholic identities to hide them? Or is this the alien just showing up and using the names of their ancestors and it goes into the whole ancient alien? Who knows? It's a very, again, just one of these other bizarre details where you're not really sure which way to what to make of it, but it's definitely intriguing.
Yeah. Now, as far as sightings, has anybody are they ever seen in ships? In that kind of traditional kind of flying saucer, if you will.
So that is one of the most interesting things that I do point out in my book is that not really. There's never been a case where I've come across where one steps out of a UFO, except for a case that I came across recently from the 1600s from the Spanish conquistadors. And they report this weird story of a blonde woman essentially stepping out of a UFO and telling the Native Americans to surrender to the Spanish and to give up in the name of Jesus. So it's a highly suspect story. But perhaps it's just been you know painted in a Catholic lens, and there was some truth to it. Um, the blonde woman is very bizarre. But as far as the modern sightings go, there's never been one seen walking out of it. Now, there was a case in Santiago, and this was a UFO seen by the whole city. It's a well documented, mass witness. And one of the people in the city, she claimed that she was in radio contact with friendship over ham radio. And they did seem to have quite a few interactions over ham radio. And she said she was talking to the friendship and that she was saying, oh, we'll make the UFO do a loop-de-loop and things like that, giving it instructions. And the UFO was listening, and it was following her command. So she was convinced the people she was talking to were aboard the UFO. Now, again, who knows? Maybe it was a drone, like it could be another, which again in the 80s would be something, would be a UFO, it would be something people aren't really familiar with, especially in that part of the world. But perhaps it was a UFO. Other people, smugglers and things who have been contracted to work for them. One reported having special equipment. They installed special equipment on his boat, and that shortly afterwards, a UFO buzzed by them and like hovered over them and crippled the ship for a minute. Like had this weird interaction, and people got radiation poisoning, and it was this weird event. But it only occurred after the friendship hooked up this equipment to his ship. So there's these connections to the UFOs, but they always seem to be kind of at an arm's length. Like the UFO, they're never sticking their blonde hair out of the UFO and getting the breeze. It seems to be this kind of tenuous connection in the more modern sighting.
So what's next for you? What is going to be your next book, or what are the ideas in your head for your next book or your next investigation?
So I'm actually working on 2 books right now. I've got a couple of, a lot of minor kind of projects and investigations to do. Right now I'm building some weird technology to test a UFO theory in relation to that weird Russian scientist and honeycombs and bees and UFOs. It's this very bizarre rabbit hole. But I'm actually working on 2 more paranormal expeditions books. One is going to be looking at some legends here in North and South America, without giving too much away. It's a bizarre but kind of more popular known legend. And then one, hopefully, and this is delayed because of visa reasons and things, but I'm going to go to Russia to look into some more of these some UFO crashes. I've got a long list of crashes that have occurred, and to look into this scientist who's claimed that he has discovered this UFO secret, to check out people who knew him to see if he worked where it's claimed he worked. I'm going to go and try to figure out as much as I can on that one. So, yep, content on the horizon. If you guys are interested in any of that, to keep up with my work, you can follow me at Chaz of the Dead on Instagram or Twitter, chazofthedead.com as well. And of course, the book is Paranormal Expedition, Hunt for the Friendship.
This has been just an absolutely fascinating conversation. Just one more time, if people want to learn more about you and find your book, where should they go?
Yeah, that's chazofthedead.com, and the book is on Amazon, Paranormal Expedition, Hunt for the Friendship. It's a story of UFOs, Nazis, psychedelics, and an expedition to the edge of the world.
Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, it was a blast. I'd love to be back on.
I'm Jason Rigdon, and you have been listening to episode number 15 of the Podcast of Mystery, originally transmitted on Monday, May 24th, 2021. If you want more information about me, the show, or my guests, please visit podcastofmystery.com. Tune in next Friday when I will be talking with the amazing visual artist Mark Rogers. His work is absolutely mind-blowing. He does these absolutely mesmerizing paintings of aliens, wizards, and other strange things. Check out his stuff on Instagram. He is at Mark Rogers Art. If you have a guest or a topic that you would like to hear on this show, please email podofmystery@gmail.com. You can also send any feedback or comments to that same address. This audio program was copyrighted by me, Jason Rigdon, in 2021 and is freely available under the Creative Commons Attribution License.